You're going to prison for this. That's what Brenda Carmichael, our HOA president, screamed at me at 6 in the morning, standing right on my porch with her phone raised like she was the sheriff and I'd just robbed a bank. And you know what set her off? I changed my Wi-Fi password. That's it, a little digital house cleaning, and suddenly it's a federal case. At the time, I thought it was just classic Brenda power-tripping, bored, way too invested in the color of everyone's front door. I had no idea this simple, half-asleep confrontation was about to expose something rotten lurking under all that suburban perfection, something nobody on this street saw coming. Let me back up a sec, because if you'd told me 3 months ago I'd be waking up to police and federal agents over an internet password, I'd have said, "You watch too much TV." When I first moved in, this neighborhood looked like a postcard, painted fences, fake-looking lawns, birds singing at noon, quiet as a library. Coming from my old apartment downtown where quiet meant only 2 sirens an hour, I thought I'd found paradise. I'm a freelance graphic designer, mostly working from home, so good internet was basically a non-negotiable. And of course, there was the HOA within a week, a welcome packet, thicker than a phone book, landed in my mailbox, packed with rules about grass, height, holiday lights, even the acceptable color of your front door. But hey, I'd lived with HOAs before SmileWave, keep your weeds down and they'll leave you alone. Or so I thought. Then Brenda showed up. Clipboard in hand, blazer-pressed smile wide enough to show teeth, but never quite touching her eyes. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, but it sounded more like a threat than a greeting. She grilled me about my job, when I work, what kind of equipment I have, whether I'd upgraded to fiber, if I planned to put up any antennas. I thought she was just nosy, so I kept it vague and let her move on, but she was always writing something in that little notebook. Over the next few weeks, Brenda kept popping up, lingering at the edge of my lawn phone, out staring at my windows. Not subtle at all. I brushed it off as classic HOA surveillance, but the first HOA meeting made it official. Brenda ran this place like a little dictator. Projector charts, warnings about mailbox decorations. "Rules are rules," she kept saying like she was quoting the Bible. She watched everyone in the room making notes on her tablet. When she got to the new resident introductions, she zeroed in on me. More questions about my office, my internet, whether I'd had any connectivity issues. After the meeting, an old-timer named Warren warned me, stay off Brenda's radar. He'd racked up 3 violations last year for stuff like garbage cans left out too long. It sounded like a joke until it wasn't. A few days later, I got my first violation email: porch light left on past 11 p.m. There was a photo attached, time-stamped 11:47. Who walks around photographing porch lights at midnight? The sender, Brenda, naturally. Then came more emails. A weed in my driveway. Mailbox flag left up. Always with photo evidence, always with that same cold attention to detail. I started to feel like I was being stalked by the HOA. Then, in the middle of a rush project for a client, my internet started crawling. I checked my router and found 2 devices I didn't recognize, both eating up bandwidth. Someone had gotten onto my network. Maybe a neighbor, maybe an old default password. I changed it to something complex, kicked off the intruders, and figured that was the end of it. But that was just the beginning. The next morning, 6:00 a.m. sharp. Brenda's pounding on my door like she's the FBI. She's furious, hair a mess, phone in my face, accusing me of disrupting community infrastructure by changing my Wi-Fi password. She starts quoting rules about Section 7.3 of the guidelines and insists I put the old password back because it's affecting her equipment. I tell her as politely as I can at dawn that my Wi-Fi is private, not part of any community network. She gets this wild look in her eye like she's cornered and says, "Don't make this difficult." She threatens me with fines, property values, even my standing in the community. I almost laugh, but her hands are shaking and something in her voice says she's not messing around. Sure enough, by 10 a.m., there's a formal notice of violation in my inbox threatening a $500 fine unless I restore the previous configuration. The section of the guidelines she cites turns out it's about satellite dishes, not Wi-Fi. I respond quoting the actual rules and point out that unless someone was using my internet without permission, there's no way I affected anyone. You'd think that would be the end. Nope. Brenda CC's the entire board, paints me as hostile, and accuses me of disrupting services for multiple neighbors. She schedules an emergency meeting, basically inviting the whole neighborhood to shun me. I start keeping records, screenshots, emails, doorbell camera footage. Then the stalking ramps up. Brenda shows up 3 times in one day, taking pictures of my house, walking by on the phone, always watching. One night my camera catches her trying my doorknob. Another time she rifles through my mailbox. Federal offense, by the way. The real twist comes when the police show up. Brenda's filed a report claiming I threatened her. The officers, Kowalski and Puig, actually listen as I lay out all the evidence. When I show them the footage of Brenda tampering with my door and mail, their attitude changes. They start taking notes, ask about the devices I found on my network, tell me to keep everything documented, and to call them directly if Brenda shows up again. I start digging. Brenda's lived in 4 different HOAs in the last 5 years, always as president. Each time she stays about 18 months, right up until a string of identity thefts, weird mail disappearances, or financial frauds start popping up in community forums. Every time she bails, right before the heat comes down. With my documentation, the police loop, and the FBI, suddenly my little neighborhood drama is a federal case. They find that Brenda's been using her position to collect personal information, install monitoring devices on home networks, and use people's Wi-Fi to commit crimes. Identity theft, credit card fraud, you name it. She'd amassed over $2 million in stolen funds across several states, all while hiding behind the HOA shield. That's why she freaked out when I changed my password. She lost her cover, her access, her power. When the FBI searched her house, they found stacks of hard drives labeled by address schedules of when people would be out, even keys some folks had handed over for emergencies. It turned out Warren, the old-timer, was one of her earliest victims. She'd been in his home, moved his papers, accessed his computer, and weeks later someone opened a credit card in his name. He'd never made the connection until now. The fallout was massive. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Law enforcement explained everything, and suddenly neighbors who'd iced me out started apologizing, sharing their own stories of odd visits, missing mail, small unexplained charges. Brenda was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Her criminal operation was that sophisticated, and the evidence, thanks to my records and others, was airtight. Afterward, the neighborhood changed. The new board relaxed some of the stricter rules. Transparency became the norm, and people started looking out for each other. No more whispered rumors, no more fake friendliness, masking paranoia. Folks got help with identity monitoring, restitution for stolen funds, and even free counseling for those who needed it. Warren and I became friends, unlikely, sure, but bonded by what we'd gone through. And I started speaking up about digital security, about how important it is to trust your instincts, even if it means rocking the boat. Because sometimes the thing that blows up a web of lies is just you changing your password and refusing to back down. So if you're sitting there thinking your neighbor's just overzealous or that little privacy violation isn't worth reporting, think again. The line between safe and sorry is thinner than you'd believe. I got lucky. I spoke up, I documented, and the right people listened. That's what justice looks like. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had to stand up to someone in power or seen something fishy in your own neighborhood? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about what real community means, what justice looks like, and how we watch each other's backs. Because sometimes that's all that stands between us and the Brendas of the world.